So Cody, you were just saying that you've been investing in car washes since 2018, roughly.
Yeah, I think that sounds about right. Since probably 2017, 18, 19, somewhere in there.
And did they originally have a subscription angle, or was that a newer development in your car wash
No,
investments?
no, 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 definitely not. I would say across the industry, and certainly in the first ones we started looking at, um, these are like single bay, maybe double bay. They're non-manned, standalone, rural towns, car washes. And so the idea of subscriptions, even back then, wasn't something most people were thinking about, myself included. Sort of similar to the laundromat industry. And that's certainly changed, probably due to people like you.
Got it. So now subscriptions are a major factor in your car wash investment, but also some of these other sort of operating real estate businesses.
Oh, yeah. I mean, well, we were just talking about the fact that, we're kind of selling and buying in the car wash space right now. But, the best car wash operators are very sophisticated now on how they apply subscriptions. It also allows them to handle some of the fact that, in the car wash space in general, and for these small businesses, they don't have huge margins. And so them being able to have subscription revenue really, really helps with cash flow, especially if they're trying to expand or they're trying to buy expensive new equipment or they're trying to get lines of credit. Totally changes the game if you have subscription revenue and you can use it for factoring on your invoices. And then certainly it's a lot more helpful when you want to sell. And that is just a way to get a multiple that isn't just slightly over your real estate value.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask is sort of, I think you look at these as sort of cash flow businesses, but often in order to sort of create a roll-up strategy, wondering how subscription has sort of affected your ability to finance and grow those kind of businesses.
Yeah, I mean, for us, when I look at car washes, first and foremost, for my little portfolio, when I'm not thinking about doing a roll up that I'm going to eventually sell to private equity or a big strategic, when I'm not doing that, it's really just on the front end of, am I buying a good deal or not? Does the company profit? Is the real estate reasonably valued? How much work is it going to be? Do I have the right operator in place? Really simple questions like that. And then when I get a really good car wash in place, like a foundational car wash that can turn into something with subscriptions, and then potentially when I get a car wash that's more of a high level luxury car wash that can be the foundation we grow on, then we add subscriptions and we do it in a hub and spoke model. So like a grouping of the car washes is in Dallas, and there was one sort of flagship car wash that was started, and from that one they did subscriptions, and then I think there were 5 or 7 car washes at the time, and all you could go to any one of those car washes to get your car washed when you had the subscription model, which I didn't actually think would be that useful. I thought everybody would go back to the same car wash, and that doesn't actually end up always being the case. They just end up driving by one on the way from wherever, then they end up going and getting their car washed, and that keeps them in the loop. And then also, kind of not dissimilar to call it what is that one? Planet Fitness, where a lot of these people just they don't do it monthly, and so the capacity is huge for our car washes, and and the utilization rate is actually pretty low, and so we try to keep it really reasonably priced so nobody would feel upset that they had a subscription for a long time, but the churn is not nearly as high as I thought it would be.
Yeah, we found in the beginning when subscriptions were sort of newer in the industry, people would price them really high because they were worried about usage, and then they end up just self-selecting for only Uber drivers signing up for their, $50 a month membership.
Yeah, that's actually really smart. Yeah, we also did some of the car washes, depending on what types they are, that makes sense. Like the Uber drivers, the taxi drivers, the for when we have really big bays for four-wheelers or even some of the semi trucks, those need to have a different pricing model that's more expensive monthly because they'll use it. They'll use it a couple times a week, if not at least weekly. And so having some like power usage for those, like for instance, one of the locations we're looking at right now is off of the freeway by San Diego, and it's a huge trucking stop, and it comes with a gas station and a few other things. So it kind of makes sense actually to have a subscription for those truckers. They're like short haul truckers, And they
Mhm.
basically come back and forth and they fill up at this gas station all the time. And so it's this cost benefit analysis of, well, we don't make a ton on the gas, but we do make a lot when they come in the store and they actually eat food and, get drinks and whatever the case may be. And so if we can factor in them coming in and getting the food, the gas, and also the subscription on the car wash, we can get to a right price that feels good, because those guys are much more price sensitive than, let's say, some of the ones in Dallas where the consumers just want easy access, a faster lane, just, that has like a member only lane and some amenities that are slightly different.
Yeah, super interesting. We're definitely seeing a lot more of the kind of gas and C store folks looking at car washes again. I think it was always kind of this like stepchild. It wasn't necessarily like very well managed, and was sort of seen as like a nice to have ancillary revenue. Recently, two of our customers were acquired by like large gas and C stores, so like by Quick Trip and Circle K, both made sizable investments in the space.
Interesting. That's interesting to know. I haven't seen them acquire any of the car washes that we're associated with, but I'm not surprised. It makes sense to me. I mean, it's very hard for those people to get subscription revenue and anything else. I mean, the closest thing they have is what, like lottery tickets, because probably people come in consistently to buy those things and they really don't make anything off of that. But besides that, getting people to come in consistently into those stores for the same thing, unless you're in a particular type of neighborhood that doesn't have other types of shops, is harder. So that's interesting.
And in the 5+ years in the car wash space, have you seen the kind of influx of other private equity and larger acquirers and aggregators change the competitive dynamic?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I think although changing a little bit in the last, let's call it three to 6 months, but prior to that, we acquired a lot of the businesses that I talk about now. I would say definitely prior to the last 2 years where we've been talking about it on the internet. And now you've seen just massive exits like Mr. Car Wash. What was that, 2019, 2020? Or was that later?
Yeah,
Their
around the
IPO.
IPO.
Yeah. So, massive IPO. And then obviously, I think they were owned by 3 or 4 people prior who all profited off of them as private equity owners before they eventually IPO'd. So car washes, I think, are one of those boring businesses that's been more at the forefront. And so because of that, I definitely see a lot of really expensive car washes today that are not properly valued for an individual investor. They're almost all valued for a strategic. And so I don't buy them like that in this market, but it's been fascinating to watch the valuations of both of those and laundromats go up. I think also people think of them as, I like to call them gateway drug businesses. They're like easier to understand if you have the standalone units. They're pretty straightforward. You don't have to have a ton of employees for the lower level ones. And so I like to use them as examples, but I think using them as examples has meant that everybody's like, I should own a car wash and a laundromat and I will work zero on it and I will make all the money. And that typically is not exactly how that goes down.
Yeah, no, I think also once a pure play goes public, the unit economics are kind of out of the bag. So it's not going to be a surprise to people now how they operate.
Yeah, but I do think with real estate prices starting to come down, especially on the commercial side, I think they're going to probably get interesting pretty soon. And I bet there are a bunch of legacy car washes up on the market right now that are just too expensively listed, should be cheaper. And when I do a deal, I always try to separate the real estate from the underlying business. And a lot of times the real estate was making it not interesting as a deal. And a lot of times you want to own that real estate because it's you're expensive to remove or to rebuild something else on. And now the real estate's coming down in price quite a bit, which might make it more feasible for people to own to buy some of these older generation car washes.
Yeah, I mean, there's a big delta still where sale leasebacks will trade for like what's considered true operating real estate, right? Like self storage versus car washes still. So it seems like that gap may change over time.
Yeah, I think that's right. What are you seeing are you seeing what I theorize, but I'm always curious because you'll have the real data on it. Are you seeing people who owned car washes before, the same owner that have owned them for a long time starting to use your software? Or is it largely new owners that come in and thus get more sophisticated with the software they use?
Yeah, so we we see both. Like the biggest driver of growth has been these new entrants because they have like particular issues aggregating customers, particularly like they might have multiple acquisitions across different points of sale, and then they really need one set of tools and one pane of glass to look at their business.
Yeah.
But then on the other side, like the existing players, they need to react to these new entrants, right? And so now they're starting to rethink, okay, how do we drive more traffic? We can't rely just on scraping existing traffic like we always have. How do we actually drive new cars into the driveway and convert them at scale? So I think they're like those two things are somewhat complementary.
Yeah. And have you guys struggled at all with the big software providers in the space seeing you as competition? And because they have such a hold on the market. Or how do you work with sort of the legacy systems, and what's your thought there?
Yeah, so I think we're pretty complementary to all the existing point of sales because we're really the way I think about it is they have very much fine-tuned sort of once the car arrives on the driveway, like to the end of the tunnel, but that's kind of where their touch points with the customer begin and end. So now that you're a subscription business, there's a lot more that you can do in relation to how do you communicate with that customer? How do you make it easy for them to remain a paying member? What if they need to make a change to their plan? So we sort of try to fill in all of those gaps that happen outside of the wash. And today we integrate with all of the top five sort of car wash specific point of sales, which we think accounts for like 90-ish% of the tunnel market.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Why did you guys start with car washes?
Yeah, so I was in private equity before starting Rinsed. Met some operators, got like really excited about the transition to subscription, what the industry was going to look like in 10 to 15 years. But then, as I was diligencing their washes, I was, receiving PDFs for the end of the month sales reports. And when I was trying to dig into customer lifetime value, they were basically taking those PDFs and having, here's how many we added, here's how many we lost. And like, that was what we could track on a Google sheet, over time. And so just thought that like, there's clear consumer fit, like people really like this unlimited subscription. And these car washes are doing so well despite the lack of sort of subscription management that they have, that like, who knows how many subscribers they could have if they were really like managing this like gyms have done for 20 years. So that was our plan, is to just sort of plug into the existing hardware and give them all these, subscription management tools.
Yeah, it's a super interesting thesis and very smart. I think we were talking before this got started about niche software, and that I find that market to be intriguing, and it certainly looks like you guys are playing that out.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we're still in the very early innings of this transition to subscription, broadly. Like of the 200 million cars in the US that get washed, it's like, maybe 10% are doing so via subscription today, but that was zero a decade ago.
Wow.
So, that continues to grow. We continue to see, subscriber same store sales up significantly. So I think that overall adoption curve is really like the big change in the industry.
Yeah, that's interesting. Is the what do you think the reason is for the slowness of the adoption curve? Why just 10%?
I mean, I think partially it's like consumer education, but it's been continually growing at like, 20%-ish a year. And that adds up over time.
Yeah.
But I think part of it is consumer education, and part of it is there's not a lot of tools to retarget your retail customers. So it's kind of backwards today in that your retail customer is only going to come maybe twice a year. And you only have that opportunity to try to sell them a membership immediately before they experience the product. Then you're probably not going to see them again for 6 months. So I think getting more bites at the apple there, hopefully, we can speed up that adoption. That's certainly one of our goals as a company.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the part that I think is interesting is, these small businesses, it's so much work. There's very few people often, unless it's a larger conglomerate of them. And so even just the idea of how do you run a subscription in a car wash, most of the operators probably don't even know that. And a lot of the operators that I work with too, or have historically engaged with, even things as simple as like, what's the proper signage? What's the first touch point with the subscription client going to be like? How do I follow the right, like, email marketing rules? Because that was never really something that I did before. And copywriting in order to do follow-up campaigns. All of that stuff is just not something that I think a lot of the operators did historically. They were like good at real estate. They were good at operating the individual units. They bought the deal well, they bought the equipment well, they kept it running. And they were good at car counts and making sure that the signage drew people in, and that their suppliers were correct. And so this is probably a whole new skill set for them that they're totally capable of doing. It's just new.
No, I think that's right. It's a different lens to evaluate the business through, right? Because they used to just be hyper focused on car count and dollars per car. And those metrics might actually lead you astray when you're running a subscription business, because you care much more about sort of overall member volume and retention.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, yeah, I don't think most of the car washes I've invested in and looked at over the years have ever really had much thought of community in mind. They might do, I think the most community play would be the historical, you think about the local school doing a free thing at the car wash in order to raise funds, right? But you wouldn't actually think about your member experience that hugely, except like, is it in, is it out, is it clean? Then they might come back, but not much more than that. So that'll be interesting for this next generation of car wash owners. There will be a lot of young people that have the right skill set for your particular product.
Yeah. And they are just like hyper local businesses as well. So we do see a lot of that, like charity fundraising, from their employees. They tend to, drawing from the local community. If you're going to be a member, you almost certainly live within 5 to 7 miles. So I think that's really like the strength of these small local businesses that they can lean into as these like larger national chains might be encroaching on their territory.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and the other thing that's nice too for these guys, and they should feel a sense of urgency, is, once you have a subscription, you just have a much higher affinity for whatever the company is, and a bigger friction point if you want to leave. And so if you are an independent car wash somewhere, or an independent grouping of car washes somewhere, and you know that the Mr. Car Wash exists, you would think you would really rapidly want to get a bunch of people on subscription so that they would come to you, even if the competitors existed. We've never really had that moat before in car washes or laundromats. It's like, oh, there's a nicer, newer laundromat. Okay, bye. And so same thing with car washes. Oh, they're cheaper now because they just came on board. Okay, bye. But if you have subscription, then you could be cheaper over the long term, and certainly you could build a community and affinity. So I think
I think it's huge for defensibility. And you were bringing up earlier that like cross usage, we find that correlates so highly with retention. If you go to like 2 or more of my washes, like ever, then you're almost twice as likely to be there still after 12 months.
Yeah. Yeah, that's super interesting. Well, it's funny. I remember when I first started looking at the car wash space back in the day. I grew up in Phoenix, Arizona. And so there was this one car wash we always went to, and it was one where they had multiple bays, and it was full service, and you went inside, kind of like, it almost felt like a ride. So like you went inside, and then you came through a place where there was candy, which I always kind of liked to the kids. You could get your like 25-cent candy. And then you went inside through there, and then there was a seating area with an aquarium. And I always like to like sit, little kid, watch the fish, whatever. And when I think about it, I spent a ton of time in there as a kid, actually. And they never had a subscription model. My parents always went to the same car wash.
Right.
And then as an adult, if I think about, have I ever had that same experience? No, I go to like 400 car washes all over the place whenever I kind of feel like it, with no rhyme or reason. And I think there's a generational shift there too that car wash owners need to be thoughtful of, which is the previous generation was one of consistency and repetition. And this generation is not like that. We move more than ever, and we have massive variation in our schedules. And so it's interesting to think about how to get them back to that car wash aquarium model.
Yeah, no, it really is about the customer experience. Like my sister-in-law is in Arizona, and it's a lot of competition, and she historically was a wash book purchaser, and there you're just competing on the lowest price for that next wash, as opposed to it being something more of like a membership relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. The other thing that, we talked about with some of our car washes was like even that experience that you have with the first person who washes your car. Again, going back to that old one with my parents. I mean, we had one guy who was always running the show, and it was in Arizona, so it was like a billion degrees outside. The world's scorched. But just that first engagement with him was always pretty incredible. And so because of that, we I remembered him. His name was Jose. We'd always say, "What's up?" He'd ask what's going on with us. He'd make fun of us for how dirty we got the car. It was like this thing every time. And so I try to have our businesses have magic moments in them, and that would be one, like getting somebody to remember the name of the person who takes over your car. And they did little things like the guy who greeted you was also the guy who closed out with you typically. And that little experience of like, oh, I remember you, we were really nice. He probably didn't even actually clean my car. He probably just came at the end and said hi and got me all taken care of, meant that every time we tipped him and we became really, good friends. And so then their employee pay goes up, which means that they have a decrease in churn and employees and a higher retention. And all of those things start from building a community, not just a machine.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think that, we're not there yet, but like I'd love to get to the point where on your welcome email, it's actually calling out who made that sale, right? And we could like personalize it in that way.
Yeah, I like it.
Hopefully, maybe the next car wash you get will be there.
Yeah, exactly. Deal. I got to buy some more now.
Yeah, exactly. So anything else have you, excited for car washes over the next couple of years?
Well, I think that I like car washes for a couple of reasons. One, like I'm sitting in California right now, and a lot of people say, well, car washes, you use a ton of water, isn't there's like some toxicity issues? And I don't think people realize that in fact, car washes, even in California during droughts, they ask you to please go to a car wash instead of wash your car at home because it actually costs less water usage. And so I think that's cool for people who are actually environmentally focused. It's actually better. Plus, we have really good ways typically for reclamation of water and also making sure that the bad stuff isn't getting into like any of the waterways, which people don't typically think about. So maybe getting that message out a little bit more. And then also I think, everybody's like there's a lot of need for, not only do we have more cars increasingly in the US, but I think a lot of people, we're keeping cars for longer. We're like, I don't know that we're taking care of them better, but there are a lot of cars on the road and like auto repair shops and stuff where people say, well, that's going to go away because people are going to all be driving electric and you're not going to need that. And I actually don't think that's the case. I think auto repair shops and car washes are going to be needed for a long time. And so I think going counter to the narrative of, oh no, in the future, we're just, everybody's going to have their own little mini car wash, or there's going to be a really quick way to do it, or there's going to be self-cleaning cars, like probably not the case for a long time.
Yeah. Do you do anything in like Quick Lube or other auto services?
I don't own anything right now in that space, no. But I've definitely looked at a ton of deals. I've invested in the deals before in that space. But yeah, we were just looking at one as a group last week. I mean, there's some issues there, obviously, like there can be historical toxicity issues with those that can be really difficult if you end up having to clean up after others, aka remediation. But I really like that space, and I think it's another one that does well in roll ups. There's a lot of people that are interested in it. We invested in a SaaS company in that space as well. They just came out of what is that called, like ghost mode or whatever you startup people call it, like stealth.
Stealth.
They just, Casper was just released, and
Yeah.
they're called Shop Genie, and it's kind of a similar model to you. But I think, the nice part about our audience is the second that they released, we just sent it out to all of our members, and that's hundreds of new users for them. So it's cool to be able to pair Main Street businesses with tools that can actually help them. Because Lord, I didn't have that stuff in the beginning. I didn't have any of this.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Well, I'm conscious of time, but no, it was great to chat and finally make
Right
the
back at
connection,
you.
learn more about yeah, all the interesting, boring businesses that you're involved in.
Well, thanks for doing what you do. I really think it's important that we provide tech not just for dating apps and social apps, but for the things that we use every day in our community. So I think it's really cool that you did that. I know that's not a totally normal thing in Y Combinator. Probably will be now that people care more about profitability, but kudos to you for kind of doing something that everybody would use every day and really need.
Awesome. Thanks. Well, it was great to make the connection, Cody.
You too, man.